e tō mātau kairunga I te rangi I te whenua, me ngā mea katoa kairunga, kairunga I te whenua. I rangai hoki e koe te tangata kia rite kia koe te ahua. Anei mātau kai tō ngaroaro I tēnei hāora, e tāpai atu nei o mātau tini he, I ngā ware tanga, I ngā ngoi kore tanga. I me te inoi atu. Kia no tonu mai koe ki mua I a mātau hei ara, hei kia ki a mātau, I roto I ngā mahi, I ngā haere ngā tu, I ngā hoki ngā mai. Kia korea mō mātau e tukuna, kia taka ki te he. Kia kina hoki mātau I ngā kōpere tanga a te ao, a te kiko, a te wahingaro. Kia kore nei mea katoa, e whai wahi mai kia mātau, tae atu ki wā mātau tamariki moko punao. Kia kina mātau, I ngā wā katoa, kia noho tunu mai koe ki mua I a mātau, hei māramatama mō mātau I ngā wā katoa, o koe rā hoki, te kaihanga I te rangi I te whenua, me ngā mea katoa kai mai te matao te whenua, kia whakakoria kia tō I ngā tapu. Amen.
So, again, it's taken care of, and we can proceed with our papawa. Now, Father, we've got assembled here a panel of people who we're hoping are going to be able to shed some light on this papawa, which is known as the TPPA, or in some places known as the TPP. What is the TPP? I'm guessing we've got varied levels of knowledge around what the TPP or the TPPA might be, not only here amongst us in the whare, but also those of our people who are watching via the live stream. And again, the information around this kaupapa hasn't been helped with the amount of secrecy that's been involved in this. Basically, it's a trade deal involving 12 countries around the Pacific. The leaders or the big players in that being Japan, the US, and again any of those countries around the Pacific Rim which are taking part in these trade negotiations. TPPA, why would it be a bad thing? Firstly, we don't know what's in the trade agreement. There are things that are being said about the trade agreement that we can't verify, and without that information at hand, it becomes a very murky process to find out what's been going on. So recently we were very lucky, one of the speakers who's going to be coming along and taking part via Skype with us later on this afternoon, 2:30, that's right, Professor Jane Kelsey. She's had a victory very recently in the High Court where she's had the decision to release information to you via the Official Information Act. And the government's denial to do so has been upheld as illegal, and so that's still an ongoing process, and hopefully some of that will come out before the deal progresses any further. Well, look, I don't want to take up too much time, finally, because we do have a group of people here who are a lot more knowledgeable and have a lot more depth of understanding about this kaupapa than I do, sitting here beside me. So, first of all, I'd just like to introduce them all and just let you all know who we do have on our panel today. First of all, sitting here to my immediate left, we have Rotorua and the MP for Wairiki and the co-leader of the Marae Party. And he has direct dealings with the National Party who are in talks at the moment on the TPPA. Also in our lineup here we have we have an esteemed legal expert and champion of causes for not only Māori but New Zealanders in general. I'm very proud to be able to say my whanaunga Annie Sykes is here as well. She's going to be weighing in on the kaupapa. Also here we have Marae Davidson, and very recently she's been named on the green list as someone who's going to be entering Parliament. She's got a long history of fighting for kaupapa in and around, fighting for the rights of ordinary New Zealanders and Māori as well. And so we're very happy to have her along as someone who's an activist for social and environmental and economic justice. So welcome as well to you, Marama, and Ngāpuhi. Sitting beside Marama, so we've got some disarray in our organisation here. We've Dr. Benjamin Pittman has more letters after his name than I have in my actual name, and has a very wide and varied knowledge and expertise that he brings to our panel here today as well. Sitting to the left of Dr. Pittman is Anjan Raman, and she's also a political activist, and including sexual violence prevention and reduction of harm from those machines that we're finding putting money into, the bright lights and things, and whirling around, that kind of stuff. She's been very active in those sorts of kaupapa, so welcome to you as well. And just to the left of Anjan is Lecture Tabito, and he's MP, list MP for New Zealand First, and he holds a portfolio for trade and commerce as a member of the Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade Civic Committee. So, Fletcher, thank you very much, and welcome again here today as well. And to complete our panel that's present, we have Edward Miller. He's national spokesperson for It's Our Future. Edward's coordinated nationwide advocacy and opposition to the TPPA since 2012. So he's got a long history and a long involvement in opposition to this particular trade agreement. So thank you all very much. And as I mentioned, we are inviting Professor Jane Kelsey to join us via Skype a little later, and she'll be part of the question panel as well. So, to get into it, Whānau, we do have a list of questions which have been sourced via crowdsourcing through the internet over the last few weeks. And what we're going to do is we're going to put one question to each of our speakers, and we're going to, because it's such a huge issue, and we're trying to squeeze a lot of information and a lot of questions into a short time. We're going to try to time those answers. So you'll have someone like sitting here with some cards just to let our speakers know that the 3 minutes has started. We'll try and condense the answers that they give inside the 3 minutes. It's a good practice, and we'll see how that works. Whether we fit it all inside 3 minutes or not, I'm not sure if it's going to happen, but we'll give it a go. Also, we do have someone who has been late today, Catherine Delahanty. She's indisposed today, she's quite sick, and she's really quite shattered that she wasn't able to join us here today as well. So our apologies come from Catherine today as well. But any questions that have been delegated to be answered by Catherine will be now answered by Marama, who's standing in as your proxy as well. So she's got twice the amount of week today. One more, Tātauma. I'm sure you've heard enough of me crackling on, and I want to give our experts here the opportunity to come forward and share some of the knowledge that they have with us around this kaupapa. So, firstly, I'm going to ask Edward to come forward, and we're going to ask him this particular question here. Something that's being on the forefront of a lot of Māori minds is around things to do with the Treaty of Waitangi, etc. Should a trade deal like this go through? And the question for you, Matua, is what happens reference to Māori rights and land. Okay, sweet. Right, delay that order. We're going to come to you first, Edward. Yep. Excellent. So just to give us a little bit more background and a little bit more information, we're going to hand over to Edward, our whānau, who's going to give us a quick roundup of the TPPA before we get into the question and answer panel. Kia ora.
First of all, kia ora everybody. Thank you very much for having me here. It's really great to see more and more people getting involved and getting concerned about this issue. It's something that I've been working on for at least 3 years, and it's been amazing to see the number of, well, to come into rooms like this and see this many people become this many people. So give yourselves all, a bit of a pat on the back for getting involved and for seeking out more knowledge about what this agreement means, because it is a massive threat to our sovereignty, to our democracy, and to our New Zealand way of life, which, we don't know how good it is until we don't have it anymore. So good on you, everybody. Doing all right here? Bit of tech support. Yeah, so basically what I'm going to be doing is just a quick roundup of 3 different stories for you today. And they're conflicting stories, and what you have to do is think about where your opinion lies in relation to each of these stories. So the first one of these stories is the official story, the one that the government has been telling us for the last couple of years. That's all good. And it's not a very detailed story. Sorry, that jumped too long. If you can. Try the space bar. Well, anyway, I'll just start anyway. The government has been telling us for a long time this quite amazing story. And the story starts with this group of countries that decided to come together to create this kind of a trade deal, which reflects the same kind of trade deals that we've had in the past. So those 12 countries are New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, Brunei, Malaysia, Japan, the United States, Canada, Mexico, Peru, Chile, and one other which I forgot the name. No, I'm not going to say that. Vietnam, there's the next one. So this all looks really nice, yeah? Just scroll down to the next slide. It evolved out of a previous agreement that New Zealand was involved in negotiating with 3 of those other countries, which was concluded in 2006. And around this period in 2006, the United States was looking for an opportunity to set up an alternative to the existing World Trade Organization trade liberalization process. Right? The problem that they had is that the demands they were putting on developing countries at the time weren't breaking through anymore. So they needed to choose a sort of coalition of the willing of those countries that they could put their liberalization demands onto. And this statement down the bottom is the original kind of statements that we used to get about what the TPPA would look like. They use words like high quality, comprehensive, 21st century, and we were expecting comprehensive market access outcomes. Just cruise down to the next slide. A couple of years later, that language had kind of changed its scene a little bit, and all of a sudden, instead of talking about comprehensive market access, we were talking about commercially meaningful access. That statement from Tim Grosser was at the end of the Maui negotiations. It's interesting to note that after December 2012, when we had our first protest at one of the negotiations here in Auckland, they decided that we couldn't have negotiations in New Zealand anymore, and they went to increasingly remote locations. The most interesting one was Guam, which is a hub of trade and investment, of course. By September of this year, we got to the point where instead of talking about commercially meaningful access, we were talking about hopefully landing in the right place, and at least it will be the very best that we can do. So a lot of that initial ambition had disappeared by this stage. Just cruise down to the next slide. It was known for a long time that our ability to actually secure a really strong deal was not really too good. This statement is from a WikiLeaks cable, so this is a diplomatic cable that was leaked by WikiLeaks, coming from 2010, where the chief negotiator said that the public perception that getting into the United States will be an El Dorado for New Zealand's commercial sector. You know, the reality is quite different, and New Zealand needs to actively manage expectations on this front. That didn't happen. For 5-6 years, we got told that this is going to be the best thing since sliced bread, or if you're gluten intolerant, then, I don't know, sliced rice. And then this is what we ended up with, and you might not be able to see this. So this is the liberalisation outcomes. This is the really good news story that we're being told. And that number down the bottom there, $259 million, is supposed to be the big one that we're really happy about. That will be the amount that we'll save in terms of tariffs not being there. We were really focusing on dairy. We're saving $100 million each year once all the periods phase in. Just to put that into perspective, we've just had a dairy price drop over the last little while. $7 billion was shaved off our dairy income compared to $100 million. I mean, this is 1/70th of the outcome. If you can go to the next slide, that's the government side of the story. It's our future put forward a different story from the beginning. We knew that this agreement was being negotiated in secret, and as Senator Elizabeth Warren, a Democrat senator from Massachusetts, says, the reason that this is being negotiated in secret is because if people knew more of what was in this agreement, they'd decide to stand up and say that this was a load of rubbish, and that's what we've been doing for the last couple of years. 5 of the 29 chapters in this agreement are about trade, and the rest of those chapters are about what they call trade plus issues, giving protection to investors, giving stronger intellectual property rights to the people who own intellectual properties, and giving corporations the power to control the democratic process in the various different countries. The idea of TPP is to give foreign investors and multinational corporations the ability to push their power beyond the border at which they already sit and start to control democratic regulatory processes in our country. The processes that should be controlled by the people in this room and the people outside this room who didn't make it here today, maybe the live streaming people as well. I'm just going to talk very quickly about 4 of those areas. One is the investor-state dispute settlement provisions. The next is the provisions on regulatory coherence, which are designed to control state action. Then the rules around state-owned enterprises, and finally the question around access to medicines. The investor-state dispute settlement provisions, there's a long history which I could go into, but essentially these are rules that are designed to protect investors from states just introducing new laws or taking action that might affect their profits or their corporate value. Right? The cases are heard in secret offshore tribunals, and those tribunals tend to have a pro-investor bias. It means that states don't normally win the cases. Corporates normally get what they want. There's no proper judicial process and no right of appeal. There's a whole bunch of problems where arbitrators who can one day be arguing a case and the next day or the next week are serving as a judge on the case. The cost of defending these cases, like regardless of what you have to pay when you lose the case, the legal costs alone average $8 million, according US $8 million, according to the OECD. Some of you might have heard about the case that Australia has been fighting against Philip Morris. The legal bills on that are already up to 52 million Australian dollars, and they haven't even got an outcome yet. And the real fear is that this puts a chilling effect on democracy. You know, the threat alone of one of these cases means that if you're a state and you're deciding on whether to regulate an area or not, all of a sudden the threat of a very expensive lawsuit and the damages mean that maybe it's not so important anymore. Keep cruising down to the next slide. Just a couple of examples of some of these cases. Who remembers in 2011 when Fukushima happened and that big wave hit Japan and the nuclear power plant started leaking stuff everywhere? Well, after that happened, social movements around the world and in large democracies, particularly in Germany, decided that they were going to organise to get rid of nuclear because it wasn't in their future interests anymore. They organised, they won, and then Germany got slapped with a $5.7 billion lawsuit by the investor Vattenfall for deciding that they wanted to have a better, safer future for their people. They're still fighting that case, so we don't know what the outcome is going to be. The Egypt case, Veolia, you might have heard of this company, they run the trains up in Auckland and they run the water system in Papakura, have been suing Egypt for $120 million for deciding to raise their public sector minimum wage. Are there any minimum wage workers in this room? I mean, we raise our minimum wage every year in this country. Canada was sued $250, actually that was Quebec, French Canada was sued at $250 million because they decided that they were going to put a moratorium on fracking. They said fracking is dangerous, or could be dangerous, we don't know exactly everything about the technology, we're going to put a moratorium on this until we know a little bit more. $250 million lawsuit. Canada was also sued for $500 million by Eli Lilly, a big pharmaceutical company, for changes in the evidential rules around how those medicines come to market. This is a lot of money we're talking about at stake here. And if you compare these numbers to the $259 million that the government is talking about, it's a drop in the bucket. Another problem is the fact that a huge number of these cases that are being fought right now around issues of oil, gas and mining. There's a lot of people probably in this room that are concerned around the degree of regulation that we have in this country over those areas. So think about that. Just cruise down to the next slide. Very quickly, a lot of the world is now deciding that ISDS is not in their interest. In TTIP, which is the sort of transatlantic negotiation, France and Germany are saying, no thanks, we don't want it, not in our interest. A whole bunch of developing countries that were stuck with these agreements from when they decolonized are now saying we're not at all interested in these. We're locking ourselves into a changing international consensus. The rest of the world is rejecting these agreements and we're running full force into them. Very quickly, regulatory coherence. This is complex legal stuff, so I'm not going to get into much detail, but this is about corporations having more say over how our legal process works. It's about having input into those processes and making sure that the laws that come through are the least burdensome on corporates. Not the best laws we can get, the least burdensome on corporate profits. We keep moving. State-owned enterprises, we still have a few. I mean, we sold off most of what we had in the 80s and 90s, but the US has pushed for this chapter to be in this agreement. There's no other free trade agreement that has a chapter on state-owned enterprises. The idea is that the US thinks that state-owned enterprises are, by their very definition, unfair to US corporations because they have a whole bunch of internal subsidies that work for the public interest, and that's why we have them. This chapter is all, I mean, we don't yet have the exact text because it still hasn't come out yet, so we don't know exactly what it says, but this is designed to get rid of state-owned enterprises or to force them to play by the same rules that US businesses will do, which will have flow-on effects for jobs and all sorts of things. The question of access to medicines has probably been the one that you've heard the most about in the news in relation to TPPA. While we still don't have the text yet, I think this is actually our success story. All of those people that have marched in the streets can be quite proud of the fact that we've managed to hold our government to account over this issue. And the increased cost for Farmac, while it's still a couple of million, it's not as bad as it could have been. So if you were out on one of those marches or shared a post on Facebook or you talked to a friend about TPPA, then you can be proud of the fact that we're not stuck with massive compliance costs for Farmac. Same with data exclusivity on biologic medicines. These are the new super whiz-bang cancer medicines that are still really expensive. We've managed to keep that, we believe, at the same level of data protection. They have 5 years, so we're not going to have massive increases that go on forever. But Big Pharma will still have a greater, that's the big pharmaceutical companies, will still have a greater say on how Farmac works. They'll have more rights of input, more processes to engage with it, so that they can try and increase their bargaining power. So the costs may indeed go up, and it will also lock those developing countries that really would benefit from a Farmac model out of being able to institute one of those. The third and final story that I'm going to tell you about is that this is not just about economics and trading kiwi fruit for butter or guns for cars or whatever. This is about the geopolitics of the entire Asia-Pacific region, and Tim Grosser has said as much many times before. There's more at stake than economics. This is about the strategic leadership in the Asia-Pacific, and he believes that the United States has and should play the key role in the next however many years. I was in Western Australia when I saw Barack Obama speaking in Canberra, saying that this is all about the strategic reorientation of the United States away from fighting wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and starting looking towards the militarization of the Asia-Pacific region, and we've seen increasing numbers of US troops in all of those regions. That's one side of this same story, where the United States is trying to project its favoured set of corporate rules across the Asia-Pacific region so that China doesn't get there first. There is a broader project here that includes, as I mentioned before, TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, the Atlantic Sister Agreement, and TISA, the Trade and Services Agreement, which is all about liberalising services, so basically making it easier to deregulate the banks, to sell off our remaining state-owned enterprises, and to deregulate other sectors of our service economy. There is resistance to this agenda, and we're very proud of the fact that 25,000, or more than 25,000, Kiwis decided that on the 15th of August they were going to march on the streets to say, let's walk away from this rotten deal. And I'm even more excited about the fact, if you go to the next slide, that just a couple of, I think it was last weekend, 250,000 people marched in Berlin to say goodbye, or we don't want TTIP. So there is resistance. You guys are a really important part of that, so thank you all for coming along. Cheers.
Thank you very much for that presentation. So hopefully that's given us all a little bit more background, a little bit more scope on what we're talking about here as far as the trade agreement is concerned. So we do have a list of questions again that have been fielded, and we're going to start trying to run through all of those as quickly as we can now. So, huri atu ki a koe nā Rotorua o tēnei pātau, what happens to Māori rights and land if TPPA comes into effect?
Kia ora tātou, kia ora e pāpā ko te awa tōngu whakarete, o tira ato mehi ki te honga ko tāna i tēnei rā. Kanuku mehi ki a koe, ko tira kia koto katoa i tēnei rā. I might just quickly, I know that time is of the essence and we're all time. A couple of things just to open. First thing is that while I am a minister and I am with the government, I can say that I have not been briefed of anything that you don't know about right through until today. There was a briefing last week of ministers, but unfortunately I wasn't able to get there through other commitments. I have a briefing set aside this week, but unfortunately the news, in fact their presentation was a hell of a lot of good information. On top of that, the Māori Party has disagreed with the move of this particular bill through the House. So that stands, and it stands on the basis that we don't know what's in the damn deal. It's far easier to make a judgment once you actually know what you're talking about and talking to. On the face of it, I as a minister and I as a Māori, I'm okay with trade. And secondly, I'm a minister of the government, which is an economic development. So I'm keen to see what's in it. That's the problem. We don't know what's in it, therefore can't make a judgment about where we go to. Specifically about the particular issue that's here, and it was about the land, but one of the key concerns that's come across in pretty much every Māori audience that I've been to is the whole question about rangatiratanga and the ability that might be lost to us that somebody else makes the decision about, in particular about land issues. I know that one of the issues that has been raised is about the ability that somebody can make specific, it could be tied to specific legislation which makes remaining Māori land and Māori ownership harder to alienate, and that's going to affect everybody. I note that some of the commentators are saying that the TPP will not put a permanent block on banning foreign purchases of property, and as I say, that's going to affect everyone. One of the issues to watch out for, I think, from the information that I've got, is about the right of first refusal over Māori land and the ability to allow iwi to have first right of refusal over land that is still held by the Crown and is to be challenged. So in terms of specifically around Māori land, those are the only background that I've been able to achieve to find out just in fact what impact the TPPA agreement will have on Māori land. I'll say again though that, and it's in one of the other questions that's coming up, a big priority around for Māori in particular is the concern about the impact on treaty rights and on rangatiratanga, and we cannot support an agreement where we have no assurances that the rangatiratanga guaranteed under the Treaty of Waitangi is protected not only just now but into the future. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora tātou. And just for those of you who do have questions that arise out of some of the kōrero that comes up while our speakers are here, we will have some time afterwards. But for now, we're just going to try and run through as quick as we can. Thank you. So the next question now goes to Marama, and it's around the TPPA. The question is the benefit for average to middle and lower class working New Zealanders. And it states, how will the TPPA benefit the average to middle, lower class working New Zealander, if at all, and when we know the trickle-down theory is constructed and distributed myth?
Tuatahi mihi mahana mihi kawana kia koutou, kia koe matua, kia koe tō kōrero he ngoi a mātou tina koutou katoa. The very short answer, how will TPPA benefit the average middle lower class worker, is not much at all, really. And if we know, for example, for decades we've been sold economic development and benefiting businesses and wealthy people will come down and benefit the rest of us, well, we already have decades to prove that that hasn't happened. And I think about the Herald article just recently which talked about, for example, homes in Auckland rising by $300 a day, which is more than what the average worker will earn in a day. And part of that is about the fact that Americans were our largest buyers of agricultural land in the last year, and as Rotorua pointed out, we do want to be able to restrict overseas investments. We might still be able to do that, but we don't know because we have to see the text. And so the 1%, I think Edward talked about 259 billion, or the less than 1%. Yeah, the less than 1% that was supposed to be our financial gain. Even if we do get that, it's going to be a long time coming. It's going to benefit mainly private companies. And in the meantime of that long time coming, it is ordinary and everyday New Zealanders who are right now immediately going to pay the costs, for example, through more expensive medicines. So no, I don't think not at all.
I've just said we'd find out that Professor Jane Kelsey is going to join us by Skype now. Just for ease of all of your hearing, if you want to just move to the front, those of you who are a bit further back so you can see and hear Jane properly, just come on up, there's plenty of free seats at the front here. Kia ora Jane and welcome. Yesterday, well, happy birthday for yesterday.
I'm on to the next year now.
Well, thank you for joining us, Jane, and bringing your wealth of knowledge and expertise with you. Again, we're just at the moment working through our list of questions. The next question is for Annette. We're going to ask you to come forward and answer this particular question. According to the hype relating to the signing of the agreement, New Zealanders and citizens generally are being told that it will be next to impossible to ever exit from this agreement. This indicates that the sovereignty of the participating nations is not to be considered as being paramount to their citizenry. So, is this true? And there's been an interesting development just this morning, or yesterday, sorry, which might pertain to that as well. So,
Ko no tātou hui mai ngā me te tūnui o tēnei whare a kāwea o tātou nei tipuna ihina. Kei te tūau ki te tautaki ngā mihi ko mihia, kia koe te pai o te aroa e manaki nei e tātou. Koutou hoki ngā manuhiri tuarangi i tae mai ki te whakarongo o tēnā koutou. Koutou I whakarongo mai nai tō kāinga kia ora. The simple answer is that Mr. Grosser lies when he suggests that we can exit this agreement once it's executed. The reasons, I think, have been very helpfully set out in the presentation this morning by our first speaker. Because the implications of these free trade agreements mean that corporate investors who have expectations to take the benefits from these agreements by certain provisions that we do know are included in this agreement will be able to take us through what they call an investor-state dispute settlement process. That process has been highly criticised, not just by esteemed professors like Jane Kelsey, who we have here, but some of the highest judges, the former judges of our country, have criticised, for instance, in that mechanism for dispute resolution, it's not going to be independent judges that are selected, it's going to be people that are paid for by those that form part of those agreements. So not only will we be able not to exit from it, but we'll find ourselves in dispute processes which I find quite corrupt. Can I just move to an issue that I have with the presentation? The key fundamental problem that we have as Māori is that there is a Treaty of Waitangi that guarantees the sovereignty of us in this nation. Is that right, Darrell? Aye. Now that's where we start with this. Mr. Key never came to Māori to seek our permission to ensure that our sovereignty is protected. He prefers to sell our sovereignty to the benefit of corporates. That is unconscionable and a breach of the treaty.
Now to you, Edward, I have the question, what would be the impact of tariff-free trading on New Zealand businesses in general, not just those like the kiwi fruit industry who have been noted as benefiting hugely as a result, but more the mum and dad businesses that are prevalent throughout the country.
Well, in response to this question, I think the first thing that I would say is that this agreement was never going to bring New Zealand tariff-free access to the markets that we really wanted to get it there. This agreement was designed to sidestep the WTO negotiations because in the WTO negotiations, developing countries were starting to stand up and say, we don't really like this arrangement that you have where we have to liberalise our markets, yet you have a whole bunch of dirty tricks to prevent this from happening. So developed countries, developed countries, particularly not the US, were not willing to accept this kind of arrangement, decided to set up an alternative liberalisation process where they didn't really have to do anything. And by the time we had the United States, Canada and Japan on board, it was almost impossible to get access to those markets. And that was the kind of struggle that you saw happening over the last couple of months. However, to answer the core of the question around how mum and dad businesses will be affected, I mean, their ability to compete in a tariff-free environment essentially depends on their ability to be able to integrate themselves within what we call global supply chains. Theoretically, a small New Zealand business could do really well for itself if it perfects some kind of industrial process to produce or innovate some widget or some sub-widget that forms a really small part of something else in a larger global supply chain. However, the likelihood of them being successful in doing this when their competitors are large commercial ventures in other countries where you can get access to cheaper labour and all that kind of thing is pretty slim. Larger competitors have the ability to be able to tap into economies of scale and they can use far larger demand to be able to get much more effective outcomes in terms of the efficiency of their commercial processes. And they're able to take financial risks that small mum and dad businesses could never be able to do and endure the possibility of a loss in that area. So yes, a small business could do very well out of the tariff-free access if that was the outcome of this agreement, which is not but it's extremely unlikely, and the odds are stacked against them to be able to do that.
So the next question goes to you, Professor Kelsey. What will be, in your opinion, the environmental effects and impacts caused by multinational companies entering New Zealand and strip mining our country, and what, if anything, is there that New Zealand could do to prevent this from ever happening?
I think the person who asked that question probably knows the answer. There are could be a number of different parts of the agreement, important environment, and one of the seductions when people do these agreements is that they go to the environment chapter and they look at that and they think, oh, it says lots of nice warm fuzzy things about recognising the right to regulate the environment, and in fact, when we had a leak of environment chapter, it's full of weasels. It's very woolly. It's got very few substantial protections. The bigger problems for the environment, and in particular for those who are concerned about issues like mining, but those who are also big in areas like geothermal or pollution of waterways and so on, is that those who are responsible for that will be protected by the investment factor that Annette was referring to. And in fact, the vast bulk of the cases that have been brought against governments, both for actions taken by the central government and by local governments, who in Aotearoa are the ones who do most of this management work, the vast bulk of those cases have involved natural resources. And so in mining or forestry or dealing with energy and so on, any changes that seek to tighten up the ways that we regulate those players, including like the shipping companies responsible for the Rena disaster, those responsible for Pipe River and so on, if the owners come from one of the TPPA countries, then trying to tighten up those regulations could lead to these really big disputes against New Zealand. If I can just give two examples, there was one recently in Canada where there was a local board that heard an application for setting up a quarry and a harbour outlet for the company, and the local board listened to the local community, and that local community said, we don't want this here. The board said the company, which was the US company, sued the Canadian federal government and won, overriding what the local council had said. The second one, which relates to climate change issues, has been an attack in Germany by a foreign company using one of these agreements, where they have challenged both climate change policies dealing with hydro and geothermal schemes and the closure of nuclear power plants. So we're seeing the importance of these and the weakness of many of the protections written in the agreement. The final point I'd make on that is that we know the Australian plain packaging tobacco case, that Australia has currently paid $50 million in legal costs and isn't even at the full substantive hearing yet. But that makes dealing with these cases really problematic and gives governments an incentive to back off.
Once again, Catherine isn't able to join us today because of the illness, but we do have Marae fielding her questions. So the next question to you, Marae, what are the potential ramifications around Pharmac and its mandate of sourcing generic and non-generic, as well as new drugs from New Zealanders?
Kia ora, yeah, and Edward in his fantastic presentation talked about that as well, but it's clear that the TPPA was going to make drugs a hell of a lot more expensive for all of us. John Key admitted that. He admitted that and backpedalled on that already, but sort of tried to wing around it by saying that the government will foot the extra bill. But all that does is grab an already restricted and underfunded health budget from somewhere else that should be used for New Zealanders to go towards something that we are losing, that we will lose because of this deal. And that's taxpayer money. So one of the ways that the TPPA will block access to medicines is, so if Pharmac wanted to buy cheaper generic drugs, for example, the drug companies could challenge that purchase because they would prefer to put their more expensive drugs on the market, and that will come down and affect all of us. And you know, one of the loudest sets of voices coming out against the TPPA has been from doctors themselves, and that, you know, that shows us exactly how bad a deal this is going to be for the health of New Zealanders. Kia ora.
Right. Now turning to you, Anjum, the question for you is, will New Zealanders be forced into paying out unnecessary insurances, filling the coffers of multinational insurance companies, in order to be able to afford even the basics of medical care, as is the case currently in the United States? What measures can New Zealanders take to ensure this does not happen now or in the foreseeable future with regards to the TPPA?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Kia ora tātou whanau. First of all, I'd just like to quickly thank the organisers for including me in this kōrero. I think that you know, ethnic minority New Zealanders do have a stake in this country, and obviously we have to work and recognise the rights of the Tangatarua, but it's not often that we get called on and get the opportunity to put our voice on issues like this. So I really appreciate that you've taken the opportunity to let me speak to the issue. So when I looked at this question, again it came back to that investor-state dispute settlement process, and I think that a lot of people have covered a lot of the issues there, and so that process involves a tribunal with 3 arbitrators, which is one from each party and then one that both of the parties agree upon. But I haven't seen the details of who in each of those parties is making the decision to appoint those arbitrators. Now that arbitration court or panel has rights that supersede any domestic laws, and also the fact that they have no limit on the amount of damages that they can award. So they can award anything in terms of money, restitution of property, costs, legal fees, it could all fall on us. And so the greatest risk here is that if health insurance companies could sue the government for public health policies that decrease their profits or affect their ability to you know, run their business in this country. And of course we do need to see the full text and what that entails, but the risks definitely are around subsidising medicines or medical devices. And it's not that the government is going to be forced to make us all take out health insurance like they do in America or even in Australia, although the Australian provisions are a lot better. The greater risk, obviously, is that healthcare becomes so expensive and that the public healthcare budget is so strained that we have no option but to take health insurance if we want to get basic standards of healthcare. And so that's where I think that we need to be vigilant and where we need to be really strong in protecting our healthcare rights. In terms of what we can do, obviously we keep up our activism, we keep up that public noise, using social media, using personal conversations, trying to get people on. Even in the tea room about a month ago, when I just mentioned it, people were like, what is TPPA? What does that mean? And there's still a lot of people that really do not know what the agreement is or what it means, and it's only people who have really looked into the issues that are aware. I think the public media, the mainstream media isn't doing a great job of getting those issues out there. And I do want to acknowledge Dr. Kelsey and her work, and the other speakers here have been doing great work in that area, but we do have to treat this as our collective responsibility here to get that message out, and also to think about our international activism and how we can link in with activists in other countries so that our voice can be a stronger voice, not just a New Zealand voice, but an international voice, because we aren't just New Zealand citizens, we are global citizens, and we should be caring about what's happening in Vietnam, in Mexico, in Malaysia, and all of those other countries. Even if some of these things may not affect us so badly, but will affect them, we should be talking to those activists and seeing how we can support them. Thank you.
What will the TPPA mean to the effectiveness of the Treaty of Waitangi?
Tūtahi a tēnā koutou ngā mana katoa o te aroa me ngā mata waka katoa tēnā koutou katoa. For me, there's an immediate problem in this question. The effectiveness of the Treaty of Waitangi. My question is effective for who? Certainly not for Māori. The other issue I have is I get really hoha when I hear this kōrero about the Treaty of Waitangi. I stand here and assert, as I have on many occasions, my rangatiratanga that comes to me through my great-great-grandfather, Patuane, te tuakana o Tametuakanene, and they took a stand and they signed Te Tiriti o Waitangi. End of story. So we have this construct that keeps invading our space. We have this myth that keeps invading our space. So my question to everybody is, again, effective for all. It's not effective for Māori at all. We have this fiddling around at the edges all of the time. And it is, for me, a last resort. A last resort all of the time. Our rangatira knew what they were signing. They knew what their expectations were. And it certainly wasn't to dominate, or be dominated rather, by some foreign government sitting wherever. End of story. And this for me is the crux of the issue. Our rangatiratanga has never ever been given up. It was articulated in Ngāpuhi Speaks, not just for Ngāpuhi, but for all Māori. The reality is, we in Ngāpuhi hold the responsibility because our tūpuna signed Te Tiriti o Waitangi in Ngāpuhi for us all. For us all. And that to me is the key question. Let's continue to fight for the answer. Ne. Okay.
I'll get to Kuira Fletcher to give you the time to answer this particular question. What evidence historically is there that the TPPA will support economic and social benefits to ordinary New Zealanders?
Kia ora koutou. Thank you everyone for being here this afternoon, and I'd just like to acknowledge my kaumātua there in the front row. Kia ora everyone. I'm Fletcher Tabuto from New Zealand First, and we have stood opposed to the TPP for the last 7 years, mainly because of its secrecy. But specifically to the question, and I hate to act as a devil's advocate for a moment, because you might misconstrue my support or lack thereof, but if you look at the ASEAN Free Trade Agreement or the Chinese Free Trade Agreement, at the moment the government is standing in the House because I am taking every opportunity to abuse them of the notion that the TPPA is good for this country. But in reply they stand up and they quote some of the successes of previous trade agreements. And they speak specifically of ASEAN and China as examples of being great successes. And they do that because, to be fair to them, our trade with China has increased significantly. What they don't tell you is at the time that our trade with China increased significantly, China was growing anyway. And China needed what we had anyway. So the fundamental question that we asked the ministers in the House was, well, how much trade would have grown despite this free trade agreement? Because China was growing and they needed our protein. And so there's this whole debate around just how necessary free trade is in order to facilitate actual trade between nations. Free trade in and of itself is good, and if I were here just arguing for or against the fundamentals of free trade, that is the removal of taxes, access to markets, the removal of tariffs, I would be standing up here every time and saying, yeah, on the balance of evidence, trade is good. But as you've seen from Professor Jane Kelsey from over there, this is not a typical trade agreement. You have seen National talk about 5 elements of trade from this trade agreement, and there's another 20 chapters that they're not willing to tell you about. So you are deliberately being managed by this government, managed by this media, and so we still don't know the full story. And I tell you what, even if it was just about free trade, the benefit to most of our primary industries, for example dairy, 3.2%. Wood is 0.6% of their total market. Now, that kind of fluctuation, that kind of difference in day-to-day currency fluctuations is far more significant than what this trade agreement has got us. It just makes no sense whatsoever, and what we're giving away in terms of our sovereignty for this supposed trade agreement is an absolute farce and an insult to all New Zealanders. Kia ora.
So we're doing pretty well on time finally, so we're going to keep pushing through with the next lot of questions. And this one goes back to Rotorua. And again, I didn't write these questions. So since Māori have a constitution, which will take into mean the treaty, does this TPPA go in direct conflict to Article 1, 2 and 3 of the constitution?
In short, yes. It's been answered by Ed pretty well, that there's an expectation, of course, under the treaty, that there is an element of consultation. And I've talked about the Aotearoa Tonga element, which other speakers have also touched on, and I won't go any further on that. But there is an expectation that the government talks with Māori in particular with respect to, or at least has adequate consultation about matters that affect our people throughout this country. And remember that the treaty isn't just about Māori, actually it's about everybody. And therefore an expectation to be able to have this debate in front of everybody else. Whether it contravenes the treaty in other ways, well, on one side the government says that there's a specific exception which recognises the importance of Te Tiriti o Waitangi to New Zealand. Well, until we see the text, we don't know. And just on that side, I understand that certainly the stuff that Jane's been doing, congratulations Jane, has actually challenged that whole notion through the tribunal, and the door is still left open, depending on the outcome of when the text actually arrives and people are able to go through it. So there is an opportunity to challenge that. But on one side we hear that the government, that there is no breaches of the treaty, if you want to put it in that regard, and yet as Jane has pointed out on a number of times, that really the clause won't deliver the sort of protection for Māori that the government says it's for. Referring to an annex in some of the leaked documents, however, it reveals that the Crown felt that the exception law wasn't quite adequate enough, and so if we believe those things that have been leaked and the discussion with respect to the government versus not having a document to measure it, then we're stuck. But on the face of it, right here and right now, if the key issue is around treaty responsibilities, whether it be in clause 1, 2 or 3, the answer is that there was a failure to consult with Māori people, therefore the answer to the question is there's a breach.
Which raises a whole lot of questions for us. Anyhow, we'll move on. The next part comes again to Marae. How would we be able to protect our customary and traditional food sources for future generations from being patented by multinational corporations with little or no regard for traditional Māori and European food sources?
Kia ora. And again, Te Rotorua has just talked about initial breaches of treaty rights, particularly if we're talking about, that there's supposed to be a special provision in TPPA to protect intellectual property and te tiriti rights. But again, we haven't seen the detail of that. We haven't seen the detail in that. And one of the things I'm sitting here listening to all of us who, speaking personally, it's takes time and energy to get inside this and try and understand it as an ordinary New Zealander as well. But let's, I've got to keep remembering this trade deal is about maximising profit for large multinational companies. So why are they going to care about a provision in the TPPA for a group of Indigenous people in Aotearoa? What we do know, even though we haven't seen that provision and how strong it might not be or could be, what we do know already, and James outlined some examples, is around the world, Indigenous people standing up for those particular intellectual property rights, they have not cared. They have not cared because it is about maximising profits. So, for example, new protections for... I'm so much shorter than... Thank you. It's Fletcher's fault. The new protections for traditional food sources, like our specific kainwana gathering sites, could fall foul of those very big investor-state dispute causes and, could lead to us being sued. So, what the heck is that clause about our treaty provision rights going to do? I'm not convinced it's going to be strong enough at all.
Kia ora. The question is, how will rongoa, that's traditional Māori medicines, in all its manifestations be affected by the TPPA?
I don't know. I don't think anybody in this room knows, and that's one of our biggest problems, the secrecy. So the first step we must do, and I do want to congratulate Fletcher. Can we give him a hand? The New Zealand First Party has done some amazing work on this, and he's trying hard to get this, what they call it's called an analysis, the national interest analysis, and he's trying to force it prior to they make a commitment to this. Now for me, that's what we need, an analysis process that enables Māori and all of us here sitting here, because I've got my Pākehā family worried about tariffs too, I'm from farming stock. I'm a Cocky's daughter. So everybody's telling us that Fonterra is going to gain out of this, but they're not. And the Cockies are all jumping up and down. But we're all doing it, I think, from gut feelings. Although I understand Fonterra's boss got an airfare over to the Atlanta. I wish that same airfare had been given to Jane Kelsey or to one of us to go and have the same sit down and listen to whatever's going on while they're drinking whiskey in the afternoon. But what's really important for me is that rongoa Māori needs to be protected. That is guaranteed in the treaty. But so should all of our biotechnologies, our biologics around the production of, in this region, the 3 Fs, you know, the fruit, the forest and the whānau, okay? Looking after our whānau through those pharmaceuticals. So I want this national interest analysis available. We're back in the tribunal on the 28th of October, as Tūrero said. We will get an urgent hearing. We want the text, but we want more than the text. We want all the clever people in this room, on these panels, that we have in this country to do an analysis and not listen to the rhetoric of corporates. So kia ora.
So this question now goes to Fletcher, and it touches back on something that was covered by Edward in his kōrero first up. And it's around the ISDS, which is the Investor-State Dispute Settlement. So the question, Fletcher, is what is the Investor-State Dispute Settlement all about?
I'll just put the mic up again. So Ed has touched on it, and as has Professor Jane Kelsey. So very briefly, what most people don't realise when they talk about the ability for corporates to sue is they think, oh well, you know, if the government does something silly, fair enough, they should be able to take the government to court because you know, they've done something wrong. The reality is, what they don't tell you, and they fail to mention the fact, and it's been highlighted several times already, is that the Investor States Dispute Settlement Clause exists and is named because it is actually a tribunal. So it does not exist within New Zealand law. It does not exactly exist in international law. It's accepted in this trade agreement. And you pointed out some really good facts, which I've never talked about before, is that it gives the businesses access to another tribunal process that you can't get, you know, in the courts. And I hadn't realised that the payouts were essentially limitless. When I saw 5.7 billion for the, what was that, the Vattenfall case against Germany's attempt to close down their nuclear power plants, it just boggles the mind. And so this is what people fail to realise. It's not a court, it's not presided over by a judge, there is no appellate system, so you can't appeal the decision. And what hasn't been mentioned this afternoon is that most of the proceedings around the world, and we're talking 90% of them, are undertaken in secrecy at the request of the international corporate. So process that. It's undertaken in secret, so you won't find out what the discussion was about, and then you can't appeal it. It's just absolutely mind-bogglingly wrong. That was my first attempt to change the trade agreement, was the Fighting Foreign Corporate Control Bill. So I tabled that to Parliament on behalf of New Zealand First to say, trade agreements are okay. This TPP is terrible, and the worst thing about it is the ISDS provision. So we were able to table that in Parliament, my bill, Fighting Foreign Corporate Control, to get rid of it. But unfortunately, National, United Future and ACT voted against it, which is why we are still having this terrible conversation today. Kia ora everyone.
So we turn now to Edward and the question: why are the populations of possible TPPA member states not able to view and comment on the entire document, especially as the multinational corporations have full access, something not even governments possess?
So the rules around access are delineated in the initial secrecy memorandum that New Zealand and all the other TPPA countries signed up to. So the really short answer is because we said it was okay, right? We have to comply with those rules because we signed up to them. International law is based on the consent of the nation state. So those rules essentially delineate preferential access. It means that one group is able to get access to the text. There's a list available that you can find with 605 multinational corporations and their various lobby groups who are able to get access to this text. While the other group of stakeholders, i.e. all of us in the room and all those other people in the other countries, are not able to get access. I asked a question to one of the negotiators a couple of years ago at one of the sort of pretend stakeholder sessions they had about this, saying, would it be possible for New Zealand to request this and be in the same situation at the initial signing of the secrecy memorandum? And he said yes. Getting back to this whole issue of secrecy, the rationale for secrecy in general is pretty paper thin. I mean, I studied international law at university, and there's a whole bunch of other kind of international legal agreements, international human rights agreements, international environmental agreements, questions around munitions and that kind of stuff that have nowhere near this degree of secrecy. It's only when a state signs up to a secrecy memorandum like in the TPP that we did, that these kind of rules apply. Now the idea that comes out, or that the government gives for this secrecy, is saying that there's some kind of tactical advantage issue that we're going to lose, you know. It's not in our strategic interest to reveal what our bottom line is, because then they might know what we're putting forward as our proposal. Which is interesting, because if you see any of the leaked texts that come out, you can see in square brackets the proposals that come from the different countries that are put forward. In other words, all the other negotiators in the room know what our bottom line is. And even regardless of whether they knew or not, I mean, MFAT and all the various trade ministries of those countries have armies of policy analysts whose sole job it is to work out what the other country's bottom line is. The only people that aren't allowed to know are us. And the It's Our Future position is the reason that we're not allowed to know is because we wouldn't like it and we try to stop it. Thanks.
Quite whānau, so a lot of heavy quarter, a lot of information to disseminate and try and take in. So stick with us. We're almost halfway. No, just joking. We're going to turn to our Skype in now to Professor Jane Kelsey. Professor, the question to you now is, how will sovereign nations receive a fair judicial hearing if the majority of individuals called upon to form these spurious dispute boards are either corporate lawyers or lobbyists? Of the 600 lawyers/lobbyists, less than 100 are not directly or indirectly in the employ of corporations. I'm not sure where the question is there, so yes. How will the sovereign nations receive a fair judicial hearing? Sorry, Jane, we've just lost your audio there. Yes, we have you now, thank you.
I'm not expecting, right. Sure, for the question. I think that there might be two things that are being considered question there. One is what Ed's talking about, which is that there are about 100 corporate lobbyists who get the text, they've cleared advances in the US, and they have an unfair advantage in being able to pressure their government both to get what they want and to resist what they don't want. And that is going to continue throughout the process as the US goes and looks at what the deal is, and will be quick to go and negotiate part that they don't like and to get more of what they didn't get. That's especially for the medicine companies. And then there will be a process at the end where it's something called certification, where the US not bring the TPPA into force for New Zealand until New Zealand has changed our laws and practices to the US understanding of what we agreed with the agreement or what it thought should have agreed. in the agreement. And that's a final kind of blackmail that says to the New Zealand government, you want to come into force, that you jump through the hoops that we want. And the court will be all over that. So that's one element, and how do we deal with that? We say no. We demand that every communication is public. We demand that all parties take positions and say that we won't allow a foreign interest, and that includes parties saying that. It also includes those who are all parties to the government, and I have to acknowledge that the three parties are really fortunate. But the second area is the investment tribunals, and that's already been quite a bit. The so-called judges in investment tribunals are mainly investment lawyers who are acting for foreign investors one week, acting for as judges next week, and then back to acting as foreign investors lawyers after. So they have conflicts of interest. Now, we believe that between the last leak we had on investment, which was from January, and the final text, the picture that we've got has seen some cosmetic changes to the rules, but we need to be able to get access to the detail, because from what we're hearing, they don't see the problem. But you can imagine that many journalists and many politicians who want to say, oh, we'll be picked up, will point to those, just as they point to trade money exception to say that there's not an issue. And so we make sure that we're vigilant and we don't buy into kind of propaganda that's out now where we can't. Kia ora.
Staying now with the ISDS process, could the ISDS process be used to sue New Zealand should we as a nation decide to implement rules to protect our resources? For example, El Salvador has been sued because Oceania Gold was not issued with a permit to open a cast mine to extract gold out of fears such mining would pollute their waterways. Could this become our fate with the likes of the gold and silver exploration permits issued at Rotorua and Taramera?
Just put the mic down. Sorry. No, I've learned, it's all good. Ai, tuatahi, he mihi hohunu kia koutou o Ngāti ki a Ngāti Tuarā, kua whakahe ki te rā tono Tian Bao Mining Corporation, me tōna tono ki te kiri hinu, ki te kiri whenua ai. Yes, Aotearoa could be sued, and it's disturbing that New Zealand's right to regulate to protect our natural environment, which is where I acknowledge again, Māori all around the motu are standing up for those very things, to be able to protect and uphold our kaitiaki responsibilities as hapu and iwi. So we've been calling for that, and so yes, even if our government was to not just roll over automatically and put in place some regulations, what could happen is exactly what has happened in El Salvador. And the thing that we need to remember about that is Oceania Gold. They want to do 3 major mines in Waihi, Reefton and Dunedin. These are the guys who sued El Salvador for wanting to protect, the government for wanting to protect the pollution, their waters against pollution. And so we should be really concerned again, that our efforts all around Aotearoa to protect, even if our government puts something in place, which we haven't seen yet, could still be rolled by just the threat of being sued is enough for our government to want to renege or back down from putting any of those protections in place. And for example, we're talking about wanting to strengthen sanctions against mining in Maui's dolphin sanctuary. We could be sued by oil drillers who want to have permits in that area. So yeah, really dangerous.
not stacking up to be smiling all around whānau at the moment. Let's continue on this kōrero. We're going to look to you now, Anjum, and ask what will the TPPA mean for our public health system? Will it be enhanced or will it be completely unaffected by the agreement? If not, then what would be the ramifications?
Kia ora. I just did want to say before that I really appreciate the direct democracy that's been happening in action here with the way that you've done the questions and so on. I think that is really great. So for this question, I just want to talk about, I think one of the issues that needs to be raised is around the intellectual property chapter of the agreement. And I read this paper by Deborah Gleeson, who's from the School of Psychology and Public Health from La Trobe University. And she wrote this about just over a week ago. And so her concerns are that there is still quite a bit of harmful stuff in the IP chapters, and particularly around patents for new uses and new methods of using existing products. And so she's looking at Article QQE 1.2, low inventiveness thresholds, which may prevent countries tightening the criteria for granting patents. Which is on a footnote 33 on page 17 of the agreement. She was looking at patent term extensions to compensate for delays in granting patents or delays in marketing approval. So then we would have to extend the life of the patent to compensate them for any delays through that processing. And a couple of more issues that she raises around data protection, around market exclusivity. And what she's saying is that it's the first time that market exclusivity for biologic products has been included in a trade agreement. And the outcome might be that it will delay competition from the generics and or the biosimilar products. So that means that, you know, with the cheaper medicines coming in, and it makes it you know, difficult or impossible to reform for a country to reform its IP standards to increase access to affordable medicines. And all countries have to adopt all of the IP rules, right? So there's no pick and choose. And that the transitions for some of the poorest countries, such as Malaysia, Mexico, Peru, and Vietnam, are way too short. And so it's like between 3 and 10 years to adopt all of these provisions. And it affects access to medicines for up to 800 million people, she's estimating, in the short term. So she's saying that there's a lot of ambiguity in the current provisions. And for me, you know, what it boils down to is that we've seen a history of this, of some of these big drug companies using the pain and suffering of terminal illness, you know, and for these medicines we're talking about cancer sufferers, we're talking about those sorts of immune diseases that people have, and they're using this suffering to push people, to put pressure on their governments to try and spend lots of money. And, you know, an estimate is that Australia spent about $205 million in 2013 to 14 because of monopolies on about 10 drugs. There's 10 drugs, and that's how much it was costing. So that's where the vulnerabilities are, and the people, the populations that would be most affected are definitely those low socioeconomic status, Indigenous peoples, people with chronic conditions, elderly, women, geographically remote groups. Yeah, thank you.
Just the last question for this particular sheet. We're going to go back to you, Dr. Benjamin. The question is, how will the TPPA affect treaty settlements now and in the future?
Kia ora tātou. Of course, this is very important for Ngāpuhi at the moment because we're going through the process under Te Tiriti Waitangi again. We keep talking about about treaty process and the settlements process under the treaty. And once again, I have a problem with it. Now, it also begs the question, from all of our settlements processes so far, for me, it's about we as Māori getting the crumbs off the table. Yeah. It's a pittance, really, in terms of what our tupuna have lost, what has been taken, misappropriated and so on. Now, I don't want to make others here feel guilty about that. This affects us all, because we are talking about the mana whenua of our lands, which are shared by many, many more people. So within Ngāpuhi, we're going through the settlements process, and in case any of you just need reminding, in Ngāpuhi we never do anything simply. It is always the most complicated, convoluted. I know that some of my tupuna created a bit of an issue down here, historically. But believe me, you got off lightly compared to what has happened in Ngāpuhi itself. We are famous for big pakanga in the house of Ngāpuhi. So therein lies a very, very big problem. So when you compare that, I'm really not sure, because we're going through the process. Ngāpuhi is the largest and one of the last. So who knows what crumbs are left under the table by the time we get to that point. But you just compare it with the risk of this Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement in terms of what is already there, not even including what is now possible, this corporate largesse on an international scale. Look at our government corporate welfare program already. Billions and billions of dollars already, many times over what all of our settlements under Te Tiriti o Waitangi or the Treaty of Waitangi have delivered. And to me, that is the real crux of the matter. So, I guess, who knows, really? By the time we get our act together in Ngāpuhi, there might not be anything.
Not holding fire, obviously. So we do have just one question again to give to each of our speakers present before we give them an opportunity to wrap up. So please do stick with us. Although that's the reason we're all here today, because we do want to hear this kōrero. So the food for the intellect is discussion, and that's what we're here for today, whānau. So let's just see this through to the end here. We're not long to go now. Before we do, I do want to thank very much all those people who've given their time and volunteered in the organisation that's setting up with today. Not only to hold the event here in our beautiful wharenui, but also to the live stream that's going out onto the internet. That's the TPPA Walkaway event held by the Activate Rotorua group. So a big mihi to you all for all of your mahi. Also would have seen in the background here, whānau, this painting. This has been donated by a local artist, Michael Stapley, who's sitting down in the front row here. It's been donated by him to help raise funds for this event and for any future events that we might need to continue to bring enlightenment to us all on this kaupapa. So thank you, Michael, for doing that, brother. It's currently being auctioned on Trade Me, so if you want to go on there and add a few bits to help bring the price up, get a bit more good there to help support this kaupapa whānau, you can go to the Trade Me site, and it's under the name Paul Waio, which is the name of the piece of art here. And yeah, it's a wonderful mix of use of our whenua. So you see the pōpō way, the red ochre, the clay used by our tupuna in their painting. Has been reused again here by Mike in this particular Please, again, go on to Trade Me, make a bid, and support the kaupapa. Kia ora. So, getting to the last question for each of our speakers here today, we're heading back to you again, Te Rotorua. The question for you is, if this TPPA is passed by all those in government, do we, as Tangata Whenua, having our own constitution, have the right to challenge it and take this to high courts in England if Marae say no to it?
Firstly, can I thank the organisers as well for putting together forums that allow us to have a discussion and get more information about important kaupapa. Ka mite mihi kia koutou ngā kaiwhakaare, ai whakariteri tēnei tēnei rā. On the face of it, I'm not a lawyer, and far better that in terms of the bigger picture about what are the legal avenues, I'd probably defer to Annie or to Jane with respect to High Court action. I'll leave it with them. At the moment, we've heard, of course, that there is an action in front of we're heading towards the Waitangi Tribunal, and that allows people to put issues in front of that court of law, and that they will determine an outcome. The downside of the Waitangi Tribunal process, of course, is number one, it takes a while to be heard. Number two, you've got to wait for a while to get some determinations out of the court. And number three, there's no compunction on any government to be able to respond to those particular outcomes of their findings. That's been the case for a long period of time. And so there's an element of timing here, because as I understand it, it's going to be, while we might have access, I think, to the text within the next month or so, a fuller text, there'll be a period of 2 years before it has to run its full course and be signed off by all these governments throughout the world. So there's a hell of a lot to do with timing here. And as we've all said, the key will be getting down to have a look at the text of the particular agreement. The one thing that I can say that has been of concern to myself and the Māori Party has been to do with the Y262 claim. Now, what's the Y262 claim? It's pretty important. It's been around for a very long time. A number of those people who promoted that particular kaupapa have gone since passed on just recently. So what it's about is talking about the protection of Indigenous intellectual property and natural and cultural heritage. And we would ask the government to give a declaration with respect to that particular claim, Y262, and we haven't heard that as yet. What I do know in my work is that the government is picking up bits and pieces of it. One part has already been released with respect to Te Reo Māori. It's not the beginning or the end of it. But the bigger substantive issue around intellectual property is one issue that's been raised across the country by all of our people, and the protection mechanisms to ensure that that is not sold out to Googler. And until we get a clear statement with respect to that part of the agreement, specifically around Y262, then there's a real big portion around any support to that protocol.
Why the need to wait for the TPPA document to be translated into the primary languages of each of the member nations when it has been discussed by representatives of these nations in the first place? What language were they using, and why was this acceptable then and not now? Seems to be two questions there, but I'm sure you're very capable.
I've got our esteemed, knowledgeable tuahine right next to me, because she just said to me that they were using English, so I knew they were using English, but also translators for the representatives and negotiators from each of the different language countries, of course. So I find this, I don't know. The thing is, I don't know, and I'm hoping that one of our other speakers might know why they're translating the documents, but it seems that it's because it was always negotiated by translation in those other languages. They need now to put it out to their respective countries, and so naturally they're going to take the time and translate them. It meant, what language were they using? Why was this acceptable then? It was never acceptable, and the text should have been released ages ago. So that's one of the standpoints that the Greens have always said. But some of the hold-up, I believe, around this agreement is actually about the specific complicated legal language in the final text. And if we just think about the interpretations in our own, by comparison, very short treaty, it's going to be really interesting to see how I think it's going to be like this document. It's going to be huge, and it's going to be interesting to see how that translates. So actually, I don't know the full answer, someone else might know. Kia ora.
How will Māori tikanga be affected by decisions arbitrated from the investor state settlement in ISDS?
Short answer, it'll be ignored, okay? As it has already been ignored. There is no document that I've seen, and I've researched with the help of Professor Kelsey. I'm acting in the tribunal, just so you know, for people who were involved in the Y262 claim. Juana Jackson's one of the main surviving original claimants from Y262, and his people of Ngāti Kahungunu have been very vigilant in ensuring the continuity of institutional commitment to the issues that they raise in terms of the attack on intellectual property and cultural rights that occurred in the Y262. The second thing about that is there is people like Dr. Paparangi Reid, who's a lecturer at Auckland University, but who writes significantly on how the pharmaceutical issues are going to affect the poor and the dispossessed and Māori. And you know, one of the greatest protests I've seen in the last couple of months is that guy down in Whanganui, the doctor who came down from John Kerr, and you know, those kind of heroes are the kinds of people that have taken us into the Waitangi Tribunal to be vigilant so we understand all of the various strands of this document. The simple answer is tikanga Māori has been ignored. Tūroto's bill too, the Māori language bill, worries me. I don't think it goes far enough, so that if I wanted it translated into Māori, I don't think it would happen, to be quite frank. It's the same problems that I've got now. If I want to use Māori in the district court, Uncle Fred will know, I have to go and pati the judge beforehand, because if there's not enough time, I'm not allowed to use my own reo in the court, despite the fact that Māori is an official language. There is still an administrative discretion within those that make decisions about the use of our language, about whether in fact it's used. And even in the Waitangi Tribunal last year, Judge Ambler, sadly, would not let a Pākehā lawyer who speaks Māori cross-examine in Te Reo. So our tikanga right throughout the judicial process is ignored, is marginalised, and in the greater well-being, I doubt whether we're going to see many lawyers in the investor disputes process. Maybe we might see FOMA there. I see Tony Weehapi here. I understand FOMA got a special briefing last week, Federation of Māori Authorities. And these are the issues that worry me. Why do special groups get briefings?
We're going to turn back to you now, Professor Jane, and ask you this particular question. Will Māori medicines be required to go through pharmaceutical companies if these companies insist on patenting traditional remedial medicines? Sorry, we're going to have to start again, Jane, sorry.
Are we
Yes,
going?
good, thank you.
The last legal teaching that we had showed that there is a recognition by the government that the Treaty of Waitangi extension does not provide enough protection for certain areas like intellectual property, and they put it in a very specific protection relating to 1.262, which is an international convention that deals with the plant varieties and so on. But it doesn't provide the protection that is needed to ensure that Tonga Māori is able to be operated by according and according to the kind of responsibilities of the applicant that have been argued. So there is a simplistic protection that people first glance may sound like, yeah, it's okay, but in fact it isn't going to. And one of the biggest problems is that the ability that exception relies on the government and recognise that every Māori has an interest and the government is prepared to move to protect that interest. And we know that the government will actually be prepared to. From what we can see, Environment Cap 12 will have some provisions in relation to traditional knowledge and privacy, but there is no requirement for informed consent, there is no requirement for profit sharing, the requirement for any of the arguments which be made in the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So it's another of these areas you're actually going to sit down and do the counter-arguments, the spin that is already there. And we need to have those who have expertise and who are advocates in terms of raw Māori to be there fronting those arguments. So we are going to, as soon as the text comes out, we're going to get teams putting arguments together, and if some of you would like to volunteer to do that in terms of raw Māori, then that would be brilliant.
So this question for Catherine, obviously being answered by the proxy, Marama. How can the government say to New Zealanders that the whole TPPA affair is completely transparent when even they do not have the entire document to make such a comment about?
Well, they simply can't say that because it hasn't been transparent at all. And the secrecy around the deal is, you know, it's one of my biggest hoo-ha with this whole thing, and that's why I got sprung on some TV interview somewhere. Someone flew back at me my comment about this being an insulting and arrogant deal because of absolutely the secrecy. But this is where I wondered, you know, this is where I wondered about those people who are saying they have faith, Pākā, Whauma, who are saying they have faith in Trade Minister Tim Grosser in getting us the best deal that can be had. Number one, when they haven't, that even if they've had a brief, they haven't had the text. And number two, are they basing their faith on such examples like the Sky City trade deal that Tim Grosser put through and was just dirty? It was just dirty. So how can the government say to New Zealanders that this whole affair has been transparent? They can't. They're lying.
Straightforward. They're not the question for you now, Andrew, what effect, if any, will the TPPA have on Indigenous peoples of the countries who have signed up?
First, I'd just like to put down my place in this. I'm obviously not Indigenous to here. My heritage is India. And even though I know my family history there goes back over 500 years, I'm not actually, our family is not Indigenous to India, we're not part of the Indigenous tribes. So, and I'm saying that because I don't want to be speaking for the Indigenous people of this country or for the Indigenous people of Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico and the United States. But I will just make a few points. There is, and Professor Kelsey did mention the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, which New Zealand signed up to with great fanfare. And one of the parts of that treaty, and it's a point that's been made, that not only do we have this right under the Treaty of Waitangi, but also under this treaty, this declaration, that requires free, prior and informed consent. And what is meant by that is that any policies affecting Indigenous peoples should not move forward without the full understanding and approval of those that it might affect. And obviously that hasn't happened. Not only has it not happened here, it hasn't happened in any of those countries. So I think not only is there a case to the Waitangi Tribunal, there's also a case to the UN to be had here in that regard. But certainly, and as has been mentioned, that there are other issues, particularly around intellectual property, around rights over natural resources, and, you know, what would happen if these were taken away by some future governments, rights around seeds, plant-based medicines that are found in Indigenous areas. And so the question is, and for many Indigenous populations around the world, the fact that they are often remote and geographically remote, and so their access to justice, and secondly that they're not really very well funded, and they often tend to be quite vulnerable in terms of what funding they have available. And the question that I would have, particularly in this country, is that if there is an ISDS sort of claim, what if our government decides they're not going to pay it? Right? What if our government decides that we're not going to fight it, we're not going to put the proper funds towards the legal costs to fund that? And whether, as part of your treaty settlement processes, that you've got clauses in there that will require the government to defend your rights. And if they don't, do you have the funds to go to international court and spend the 50 whatever million or however much it might cost to defend those Indigenous rights? So that's something to think about.
And this is the last question before we go to the wrap-up from each of our speakers here today. It's to you, Dr. Benjamin. How can this government sign the TPPA without my consent?
That's another very easy answer. It can't. But hey, has it ever stopped it before? No. Very, very simply. No, I think back to my tupuna, Hatuane and all of the other ones. I think back to my kaumātua kuia, who took me under their wing and taught me many things. And you know, in relation to this question, they never ever needed anybody to explain to them what rangatirakanga meant. They did not need anybody to explain to them what the allied responsibility that went with rangatirakanga, kaitiakitanga, meant. They did not need that explanation. They lived it, they knew it, they handed it on. And you know, in relation to this question, I'm constantly reminded by my tupuna, my kaumātua, my kuia, and one of the pearls of wisdom that was shared all of the time, and I always remember it, is the saying that I roto I ngā mea katoa e pene, ki mihi te mea ngaro. And in dealing with the structures that we have representing us, supposedly sitting down there, it's, I think, very timely to remember that. You know, for me, for our people, for all of us, justice has no use by date. And truth has, for me, ultimate immunity against fabrication, against lies, against spin, and against fabrication. You know, e tātou nā, we have been waiting 175 years for true justice. It is never going to run out of its use by date as far as I'm concerned. It's there, and my gosh, we are still waiting, we are still objecting, and we are still asking a question. So, absolutely, the government has to talk to us about this issue. And I was furious the other day when I heard Tracy Haupapa talking for that structure called phone or whatever they are, and whoever they represent. To me, tēnei te mea nui. It is about money before money. And I'm totally unconvinced by the so-called Treaty of Waitangi Protection Clause. Because to my way of thinking, again, as I shared with you before, and as you're all aware, our tupuna did not sign anything called the Treaty of Waitangi. They signed the Treaty of Waitangi and they knew exactly what it was about. And to me, this is not about an interpretation, a meaning that is outside what our tupuna stood for and what they understood and what they signed for. They have been shortchanged endlessly, and I'm hoha with these constant excuses. Yeah.
So now finally we've reached the end of the questions that have been fielded from the internet sources. We do have a segment where we're going to ask, and I think it's probably the question that we all have burning in the back of our minds. It's been a lot of information given and a lot of stuff to think about and try and break down. But I think ultimately what everyone's wanting to know is what can we do? What can we do as a whānau, as a hapu, as niwi, as a member of our community, as far as this trade deal is concerned. So before we do, just turn and ask each of our speakers today to address their kaupapa. We are going to have some time after this to go for a cup of tea at our whare next door, our dining hall. So if you do want to just dissect some of the information a little bit later, come for a cup of tea. We're going to have one of our local musicians has donated his time. Chris Weber, he's going to be performing in here as well. So do come in and just spend some time and just take a cup of tea. But we're going to ask this final question of our speakers, and we will have some time, a very short time, to asking questions of them that you might have as well before we do go for a cup of tea later. And we're going to start and just work our way down the line. And the question for everyone to consider is this: what can the people of New Zealand do to stop the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement being ratified if they feel it is not in the best interest of our country and our people?
I think that people are already doing what are clear strategies about expressing protest, about what people disagree with. The actions taken all the way through court action, through to Vikwa that we've been a part of, all of us have been a part of, making it known about everyone's position. But for me, it comes back to the crucial issue. We have no text to make a judgment one way or the other. And until we get that text, we rely on arguments both sides, one side or the other. For me, it's all about getting that information, being able to dissect it. I take James' point that if there are people able to, I'm not a lawyer, but if there are people able to dissect the particular sections of that act when it comes through, and not the agreement, and give it some beef and some meaning with respect to what it might or might not happen, and it mean to people, that would be pretty helpful. Those sorts of actions have taken place in the past for many things that I've been involved with, and it's all about information. The more information people get, both sides of the argument, to be able to make an informed judgment, far better off it will be. So all of those campaigns should continue, and wait in anticipation for the distribution of the text so we can get our teeth around it.
I had the privilege yesterday of attending an 80th birthday at Bastion Point for a great Pākehā freedom fighter, Jimmy O'Dea. And he was one of the few that got arrested at Bastion Point. And he was the bus driver on the Māori Land March. He got arrested at Raglan. He's a union activist. He was an occupier of the homes when they first started privatising them in Kitemoana Street. He was evicted, then he's in Kupe Street in Orake. And he was with us fighting desperately for the foreshore and seabed. And he said this at his birthday yesterday: justice you get is the justice you fight for. And one thing I learned as a treaty activist, that I can go to all the courts in this country and I can win. We did that in the Ngāti Apa case for the foreshore and seabed. I can go to all of the international forums and win. We did that with a whole lot of things that we did for the United Nations, Indigenous rights of Indigenous people. But still, the New Zealand domestic government can ignore us. So we have to be imaginative and we have to demand justice. Now last week, Tariki came to see me in my office. We have these weekly talks. He always likes to make sure I don't get too radical and think of what I'm doing everything. And he said this to me for us in Tangatarua: we should outlaw the TPPA text in Tangatarua. We should demand that the local council outlaws the TPPA implications in Tangatarua. We should demand that our Pākehā brothers and sisters, our Asian brothers and sisters, stand together with us to outlaw this. Why? Because the justice we get will be the justice we fight for. And that's what we need to have resounding right throughout every community in this country. I'm really clear, 95% of the Māori world do not want this. When they started the multilateral agreement on investment, and I've been protesting this since 1992, we marched this country and we stopped that agreement. Tim Grosser and John Key and all of the people in the National Party will try and intimidate you to say that we cannot stop the agreement. That is not true. This country can stop this agreement because if we believe in democracy, if we believe in the treaty, if we believe in future generations, then we will fight for the justice that we will desire. Kia ora.
Yeah, I absolutely total what has been put forward here tonight from all of our passionate speakers actually. And Edward already talked about a specific example of the power of our protest and our public scrutiny bringing some gains for some medicines in terms of what the trade deal is going to amount to. So we have got examples again, alongside the ones that Annette has pointed out, where our voice really does matter. I think, for me though, I keep wondering, why is this going through in the first place? It's because we haven't inspired a lot of our people to be involved and to be engaged. And I don't blame when I say our people, I mean New Zealanders as well, not just Māori. A lot of our people didn't vote, for example, and the government is only allowed to put this through because people didn't vote them out. And part of it is because we haven't inspired our own to feel like this is relevant for them, to feel like they need to know. There's a lot of work we all have to do and own around that, and we're up against popular culture, which means that probably people know more about the Kardashian family than they do about this trade deal. And so we've got that ongoing challenge, which we all know about. But one of the bigger things for me about inspiring is that this whole trade deal is going in a direction that is the complete opposite of the overall world direction that we want to go on. And here I'll acknowledge Jane Kelsey's book, I think The Economy of Fire, that I haven't read, but from the interviews that I've seen, it talks about what we all need to be talking about, which is, so far what the economy of the world has been doing is to take from our water, from our oil, from the earth, take, as if we've got so much of it to use forever and ever. Take. And our economy needs to change that mindset. Our economy so far has evaluated people according to their dollar wealth, It has evaluated people on really narrow terms, and it has gone away from valuing, for example, our mama or our parents who are purely focusing on looking after our mokopuna, and it has put value onto all the wrong priorities. And I would feel inspired to keep seeing those examples of the alternative economies, the directions that we need to keep going in. That is not what this deal represents. And I think that part of what we can do, alongside everything else that has been talked about, is to keep speaking about those solutions. And a lot of them are Indigenous. We know this, not just Māori Indigenous, but iwi take around the world. A lot of the solutions are the traditional wisdoms that our people always had, and that's where we need to get our economic, our social justice, our cultural thinking back to for the benefit of everyone. So I'm really keen for us to keep sharing those stories and inspiring each other, so we do feel like there's something else that we can look forward to. Kia ora.
You know, one of the things for me is I'm immensely proud of our tupuna, all of our tupuna, and what they stood for, what they believed, and what they knew would come about. I know Patuane did say, one of the things he said was, it will only be in the time of my great-great-grandchildren that the dreams I have for my people will start to come to fruition. We have been waiting 175 years. Going back before then, of course, that particular tupuna of mine was a partner in the Sir George Murray, the first ever Pākehā-style ship, that stimulated an international incident because that ship arrived in Poihakena with no flag or ship's register. They had one made out of harakeke, but that wasn't good enough for the British Admiralty rules at the time. And so thereafter, signatory to the letter in 1831 to King William IV. Thereafter, the big thing for us in Ngāpuhi Hewa, Putanga, signatory to that, and then of course to Te Tio Watari. So I don't know about you, but I'm getting a bit tired. And also, as one of Patuane's last great-great-grandsons, great-great-grandchildren, time is running out. So I have to do my bit to make that dream come true. So I guess, you know, with all of this, we have to, with this process, we have to insist on facts and truth, not spin, not all of the nonsense, not all of the weasel words. That's meaningless. And of course, for all of our people everywhere, it is about engage, engage, engage for me. It is about protest, protest, protest. It is, and I totally agree with our whanaunga here, marama, it is about voting. The last election, I tried to get as many of my whanaunga up in Tautoko to go and vote, and they'd say, oh, uncle, I'm boha. It doesn't make any difference. The problem is, when we've got that sort of thinking all around the country, little wonder it can't make a difference there. Good.
I just have a couple of points to add to all the wonderful career so far. We had in Hamilton earlier this year, a conference put on by the community sector, and it was for NGOs and so on. Part of the program in the afternoon was we got to choose the topics. And so a lot of those topics were, if you're in the community sector, is how to get funding, how to get your programs going and all those sorts of things. But there was one Marae who raised TPPA. And so that was one of the discussion groups that happened at that conference. And I just thought, how cool. And that, I know that a lot of you who are here present and who are watching live streaming are involved in organising events. And it doesn't matter, as far as I'm concerned, if that event apparently doesn't appear to be anything around the TPPA, because as we've seen from the time that we've talked today, that it touches on so many issues that I can't imagine that there was an event that you were organising or a conference that you were a part of that you couldn't put this on the agenda. It needs to be on the agenda everywhere. Secondly, I'll go back to that issue, that what I raised in my first question about connecting up to activists around the world and using political processes. The US, for example, is going through their presidential debates at the moment. The Democrats just had their first debate last week. Bernie Sanders has been speaking out strongly against TPPA and has pushed Hillary Clinton to actually start making noises against it. If you have contacts overseas, if there are people that you can support or talk to or push to be voting for the right candidates who are saying the right things, please do that. And City Council elections are happening next year, and I can assure you that the people that are planning to stand are doing the talking about it now, and you should be trying to see who you can support or trying to encourage people to stand who support this kaupapa and who will be, fighting for this for us. Thank you.
Kia ora again, everyone. I think one of the most important battles that we face as we move forward in this TPPA process, and it is about awareness. So this government, this national government, deliberately went into negotiations, signed secrecy memorandums, because they knew that if the people of New Zealand knew the details of this treaty, we wouldn't support it. So the battle is about awareness, and I'd like to acknowledge the likes of Ed and Professor Jane and those who have walked the streets of New Zealand in protest. I, for one, have been there in Rotorua and spoken in Wellington to support the drive, the mandate to create that awareness, because that is half the battle. What is interesting now is what we're seeing overseas. So it was Berlin, 250,000 people walking down the streets of Berlin protesting against this. What you will see in the US is numbers the same or greater of people protesting against this trade agreement. From me personally, as a Member of Parliament and as a member of New Zealand First, I have taken this battle to the members, to the government face to face, and I have done that in two ways. I've done that through the Fighting Foreign Corporate Control Members Bill to try and get ISDS out of this trade agreement. And just last week, I asked every question in the House on behalf of New Zealand First, and every question in the House was, how dare you do this, and what is actually in this TPPA deal for New Zealanders? And all we got was just the media spin, the puffery, and how wonderful it is. And I just want to end, I think, on this one note. I have also asked Parliament to debate the International Transparent Treaties Bill, because at the moment this treaty comes in to Parliament, but we've already signed it, and then we debate it, and then we ratify it. But by then it's too late. So my bill asks for the House to debate it before it's actually signed. Thank you for acknowledging that earlier there. It's a turnaround. It's a turnaround of the process so that the people of New Zealand can actually see the debate, see what's in this trade treaty before it's actually signed by that select executive group, John Key, Joyce and Grosser. It's just wrong. Thank you.
This is not over. I mean, we have a concluded deal, but it's very likely that it's going to be extremely difficult to get through all the domestic legislatures of all the other countries. Our job is to make sure it's as difficult to get through New Zealand. own political system. And there's so many ways you can do that. I mean, you can hand out flyers on the street. You can bring it up at parties when people are trying to talk about the rugby. That's my favourite. You can ask Greg about trying to get a resolution in your local council, regardless of where you live, to declare your own region a TPPA-free zone. You can join a political organisation that's organising to stop this. You can bring it up in your existing political organisations. You can make sure that your union, if you're a union member, is doing the most that they can possibly do on this. And most importantly, you can join us on the 14th of November because we're having another nationwide day of action. Rotorua is going to join us, I hear. That's the rumour. And if you don't think you can get a very big protest going here in Rotorua, then you're wrong, because a couple of protests ago, Hamilton was not looking like they had a really big movement going on there. There were 200 people a few protests ago. There were 2,000 people last time. We can do this, and we can stop this agreement. It just relies on us looking at the impediments that we have inside our own brain, stopping us from effectively doing that, throwing those out the window and just organising like crazy. So let's get out there and let's do it, right?
And just before we go to Professor Dusty for her wrap up, I'd just like to add that probably one of the most immediate things we can all do is utilise one of the tools that's been most powerful in getting this information out, and that's social media. You know, we can all click like, we can all click share, we can always add that stuff to our Facebook wall or whatever it is that you're using as a way of getting that information out there, because the mainstream media isn't disseminating this information for us. And as one of the most powerful tools that we have at our disposal, social media is right up there, and we're able to just do that with the click of a button. So next time you're watching cat videos, don't forget to share the TPA stuff that's going on and that's going around as well. You know, we can all do that easily. It's a click of a button. Right? So let's continue to do that as well. So we'll just turn to you again, Professor Gussie, and just get your views on what it is that people can do on a day-to-day basis to help stop this.
Kia ora, whānau. What we have to do is to make the political price too high for them to be able to take the next step in it, and then the step beyond that, and then the step beyond the step beyond that. We never to get distracted by the fact that, okay, they've done a deal and we can stop them. Well, we can stop them, and then we stop them before. I've got a few additional suggestions. The first is that we stop calling this a trade deal. It's not a trade deal, it's a corporate rights treaty, it's a corporate control treaty. We need to rebrand, we need to take back the name. The second thing that we need to do is get out there and start making the setting the terms of the debate. What we did for the last 5 years to stop the secrecy was we set the agenda. In 2 weeks of spin, they have managed to claim back a large amount of that space in the Rotorua alongside the men. We need to set the agenda again, and that means it needs to be clear that they have not managed to sedate us and seduce us by the spin. And that means not only is it getting out there on the 14th of November, but that is incredibly important, because they've been shaken by the fact that we've got 25,000 people across the country and over 20 towns and cities in the latest of a whole series of protests that were growing in numbers. And we can get people out there, but we really have to tap every single person in every conversation we have, not just to be aware of it, but to be outraged and out there. That means also going to the communities that we have, not only on the Marae, I spoke at a Malaysian Economics Conference about a month ago, and public support for what I was saying. It was support for what we were saying. And it's crucial that the voices that are the cheerleaders that have been brought in to support the government are not left by default to be able to speak on behalf of Māori or on behalf of all of us. In addition, we need to keep having events like these, and that's what Rotorua has been organising as Rotorua. You've done a great job. Thank you, Rotorua. Tuesday, I'm speaking at Orake along with Moana Maniputu. So we need to keep having these events around the country, and it's really great that there's such a broad platform of speakers, because one of the discrediting mechanisms has been to say this is all a beat up by me. Now, I'd like to think, no, actually, I would like to say it's really important that people are owning and getting confident enough to get up and speak about this. And I turned 60 last night, so that's why I'm actually still up in Auckland. It's great to be able to participate by Skype. There's all sorts of ways that we can do these things now. Māori media is really important. Going to those Labour Māori MPs and saying, you think you're going to win these seats next time? Well, you're not, because we're not going to vote for you if you let your party support the TPPA. And that's really important. Right inside Labour, Goff, Shearer, Annick King, a bunch of those who are the old Roger Gnomes from the 80s, the ones who brought us the disasters of the so-called trickle down that only trickled up. And so we need to have ascension inside Labour, and that's only going to happen if there is pressure. The councils are another crucial local place. Now, just another couple of points to close on. One is, if they do get this food over at these bodies, we then need to make a campaign about exiting from these agreements. Not just the TPPA, if they bring that about, but the other agreements. We have other agreements that give foreign investors the rights to sue, including the China agreement. We need to stop them doing this in future agreements. We currently have several other big negotiations in secret where they are planning to do exactly the same thing. They are big international corporate rights agreements, and we need to make the anti-TPPA campaign the precedent setter for stopping those other negotiations, forcing transparency and what we call the Dracula principle, dragging them into daylight so that the dagger goes into the harbour. We need to start saying we've had enough of this kind of future, and we need to take back the right to decide our own future. And in particular within Aotearoa, we need to say we have unfinished business here. We need to recognise the oratiratanga. We need to deal with manatutake. We need to start addressing how we can have a different future in this land and not have our hands tied by secretly negotiated corporate rights deals. So this is a struggle for our future, and if we don't take it in our hands now, then future generations will hold us to account. Kia ora.
Professor Jane Jossie, who a little wonderful mum there, she just whispered in my ear and told me that she's been also nominated for New Zealander of the Year. So So we have asked a lot of our speakers today already, and we're going to ask just that little bit more We're going to open up the floor for questions for everybody. We're just going to give it a very short time because I know that everyone is a bit drained. If you do have a pātai, we've got a microphone here so that everyone can pick you up, not only in the house here, but those people who are live streaming into the event today as well, for them to be able to hear the question that you're asking. Please come up to the microphone and ask your question there. Before we ask our panel to our panel here to close for us, we're going to open the floor for just a brief time. So, tēnā he pātai wā koutou, mai ki tēnā koe kōrero me pātai.
Hi, I'm Maureen, and my husband has been quite affected by Alliston, and he said to me the other day that, I don't think I didn't read it, but he said, oh, it looks like if we don't get him, we're going to lose out. And it's kind of really affected him, so what can we do?
Do you have someone that you're going to direct the question to, or does anyone feel like they've got a good answer for that one?
I don't know if you're I think you should go and have a meeting with Fletcher, one of his local MPs, or two people, because both of them I've explained things, I think, a little more objectively. He shouldn't feel like listening to the media. You should encourage him to look at the pamphlets that Our Future. They're really simple, they're really good, and Jane Kelsey's put some little brief discussion points, and he should be encouraged to meet with these people, because I think everybody's overwhelmed by there was this kind of bombardment on the media. But that's my view. I'm happy to meet with them, but I'm in court at the moment, just letting you know. I've been in court almost every day for the last 3 weeks, and in different forums. TPPA is one of them. And, that's what I do. That's why I think we've got some good MPs here, and the Green Party, the Green Party and the Labour Party. Can I ask why they aren't here? Because, I'm really surprised that they're not amongst us. I see some of their activists here, but I'm with Jane. I think we need to get the Labour Party in this region anyway, really clearly standing on the left with us here and making it very clear that we do not support the National Party right-wing agenda.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I remember about 3 years ago, I saw Phil Goff ask this question, or he said it in a different way. It was at a speaking thing, and he said, when I was Trade Minister or Foreign Affairs Minister or whatever he was, I used to stay up at night thinking, what if this was a really good deal and we missed out on it? And I thought, well then, once we had the text, then we just sign up to it. I mean, the plan is for an Asia-Pacific-wide agreement. Why would they not want us to sign up to it later? Because they want to trap us in a deal that's bad for us.
Kia ora. My question is to Jane, if she can answer it, and to all of you. The Maori economy is generating about 35 billion to the New Zealand economy at the moment. Now in 1986, when Sir Geoffrey Palmer repealed the Constitution 1952 UK, it left us without a constitution. Now, if the government hasn't got a constitution, they have no power to rule. But however, Sir Geoffrey Palmer repealed the constitution in 1986, and then, which effectively cast the government adrift. He then re-enacted the common laws of England, which we are under at the moment. Now, the common laws of England, which include the protection of the Maori laws and customs. So we're under the common laws and we are protected. So this leaves our culture protected, and also it gave us, the government, no power to enforce their laws on us. Now my question was, if that is so, how can we be forced to be included in this TPA? How can we be forced to do that if we are protected? Is that... There's 35 billion at stake here.
Okay, let me shortcut the answer because I would have a very different interpretation of what actually went on with what Jeffrey Parnell did. So let's not get bogged down to that. The last part of the question I think is the really crucial question, which is that Tangatarua, as the Waikato Tribunal has recently acknowledged, was never conceded. It remains intact. It is the right of hapu to exercise whangatirotanga, manabukahaki, or whatever one is followed according to Māori, and this agreement strips all that away. Now, you can have as many arguments as you like in the Waikato Tribunal about that, and those arguments will happen, but that's still litigation of Crown. If Māori want to have a voice, then Māori have to exercise that voice in all that are Māori in ways that government can't ignore. Now, Māori have done that before, very effectively. And it's a question of revitalising those avenues and seeing this fight around the TPPA as just part of the ongoing fight against historic and colonisation. And many of us as Pākehā, as Tauihi, will be in here with you because this is our place as well. We have to fight this place as well, but we have to fight this in support of you.
We need to join up with you then, don't we? As the word Māori is not really a Māori word, I would like everybody to refer to us as the Indigenous Native Tangatarua from now on. Okay? We'll see you at Waikani. Okay.
Hello, my name is Wendy Brown. I'm a member of the Green Party, local Green Party here in Marae. I don't know whether you might like to field my question. I'm just wondering if there's been any speculation about the effect of TPP on climate change.
Well, I mean, absolutely there will be, because the large multinational corporations want to keep digging and extracting and pulling out fossil fuels, which is what has helped cause climate change. And so that's what I say when and this is only one part of that answer, someone else might want to add, but the protections, for example, that the Greens would like to push and put in place around, for example, reducing carbon emissions, again, we could be sued over that. Those very protections to deal with climate change. Yeah, absolutely, this is going to affect it. Yep.
We're just going to ask for the last two questions. So, so if you have our last two questions here, thank you very much.
Tētahi kia ora koutou community pai. So I'm a bit scared because we just launched We're Waiviki Greens, Joseph and I. So we've just come over from Whakatane, and I've just got a question for Edward, just a practical question really. I was just wondering if you would be available to come to our town to speak sometime when you're free.
E kui kono maa na rale
te mātau ka tēnā koutou katoa. Ka te mihi ngā rangatira o tūmaki, tēnā koutou, tēnā koe, Jane, Kelsey, tēnā koe. I just wanted to come up and mention, on Friday we had a meeting and Tim Grosser was there. And I must say, the body language when we talk about that gut feeling wasn't impressive. And I've just got a couple of things that I want to mention here on that and let the people know that, well, first of all, thanks to that one about fighting for our rights. And you were right, we were in Hamilton marching and protesting, and that 2000 was exactly right, over 2000. It turned up, and I'm getting to my whānau from Tangatarua, it's turned up here in Rotorua. I want to say, as part of the Race and Residents of Hamilton, we've been here to support Rotorua people with the First Nation, we've been to cohort teams, so we're right behind all this great money that your brothers are doing. And I want to listen to people in regards to the US strategy is to create a new global legal economy by using the 3 big T's. And it was mentioned, people don't know, the TPP, the TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade Investment Partnership, and the TISA, which is the Trade and Service Agreement. And this is the message that we pass on through our Facebook. And the US is scared of the rise of China, which was mentioned. And the European state sovereignty democracy is about foreign investors. I want to mention here, who are the foreign investors? And really, these are the big US corporations who lock in their power, and it is very scary. I asked Tim Grosser about I asked him the question, who was former? I hadn't heard of it. And someone mentioned it. It was the Federation of Māori Authority. Hello? A lot of people didn't know who they were. And Tim Grosser got up and asked, the former has got billions, $40 billion, and they're good for this. And they all agreed. And like said, Tracy Hopapa got up and said, where's she come from? I've never heard of it. And it was good to hear that brought up. And I wanted to the SBIS Investor State Dispute Settlement. I'm pleased to point that off. I just want to finish off by saying, media lies again. Helen Clark was on media saying she agreed to the TPP and support the current TPP. Now I'm going to read this out by remarks from Joanne Donovan. Where in the world does the ex-Prime Minister of a country respond to ordinary citizens? I just messaged Helen via her Facebook page. She says she supports trade, not TPPA. She signed up for it, its original form, and not the form it's in now. She said, I quote, I'm not responsible for the spin media and others put on my words. So just to close, and I'm going to have my punch here, regarding this flag that I am a veteran and fought for freedom and our people and democracy. Or did I say democracy? That's what you talk about, because that doesn't exist in the vocabulary of our Prime Minister Grosser. And so tell people they've got to register and they must vote, because if they don't, it'll go to yes vote. So I just want to finish by saying, ka whaiwhai tunu, mātou ake ake ake. Ka whaiwhai whaiwhai.
Since I've got the mic, I will ask direct question with a yes or no. I'll use my own mic over here. So we go to Tangatarua, acknowledging everybody that's been speaking. Stand as a descendant of Treaty Signatory to Lady Hiroa. And kia ora. Descendant of Tarangi Hero. Kia ora. Let's go through some descendant of Tarangi Hero. Take the mic out of the computer. Thank you. He signed the treaty at Rotorua, on Kapiti Island. And his great-grandson was Wiparata Kakakure, who took the treaty case where the judge said the treaty was nullity. Great-grandson of his. A question to the panel, as it's been put to me, that there should be a brown list, a black list, and a red list of people that are offending against the nation in terms of minor things, in terms of outlawing things for different rohe, or things you might consider treason. And it's such a day of truth and reconciliation. Those people don't come off those lists too quickly. Would you support, do you support, could you support the people responsible for this TPPA being listed on the black list? Whether or not it goes up to the red list, it's up to them, up to the people.
On the face of it, I'll say no. People do their jobs, for better or for worse, and they take the consequences that come with it. I'm not in favour of that sort of situation, because one, I don't know who those people are. That's a bit of a problem in the first instance. And secondly, that until we get the bigger picture about what's been rolled out in front of us, I'm not prepared to put anybody on any blacklist, whitelist, or whatever list. I don't think that's appropriate, and certainly not for me as a politician, and as an individual I disagree with that. But that's my view, and under the if you're talking about just this agreement, then that's what I'm talking about.
I think it should be the white list. I don't see too many black people on there, but maybe Obama, hang on. But I think the question's too difficult to answer in the context of today's discussion. There have been constitutional violations of the treaty quite clearly, Te Treaty o Waitangi, by the government and its officials that have chosen to deal with Māori rights without our free and informed consent, without consultation, and without giving us the principles of natural justice in the way that we engage with the government. And I think that needs to be stated. I do believe that if we are able to get a bill through Parliament, as what is being sponsored by the New Zealand First Party, which is asking for us to look at all treaties and ratify them prior to execution, then, and if that's passed, then as part of that, we could ask for the resignation and the vote of no confidence in Mr. Grosser at that point. And if that was to bring down the national government, we should then force a snap election.
I'd like to thank once again everyone that's turned up today for this photo, and remind you we are going to have a cup of tea following this. We will have an opportunity to discuss a little bit further. At this time though, I'd like to turn to our pipeline and ask that they come and perhaps close with some of their own comments and give karakia Lorena te wahanga kia poto
I hate the car initiatives.
whakau e. Tēnā koe. A tuatahi ka hoki ngā mihi ki te kaipakarite o tēnei hui, tēnei rā, tēnā koe, a ki aku koe ke kaumātua koutou mā tēnā koutou. Ke koutou o te pōri kai jauki o tēnei kaupapa, ka ki hoki te mi. Kia koe te minita, tēnā koe, e ne, koe koutou mā o te whare mata, ngā puhi ainia. Tēnā koutou ka mi hoki te mihi. A tāhua hoki ki te whakarongo ki o koutou kōrero i tēnei wā. A kia koe te ahorangi, tēnā koe, tēnā. E nui hoki tēnei hōnore mō te awa. Ko tai koe i wainanui a mā, te aha koa i rungi te pihitua. Aha, no reira tēnā koe. Kia kaha, kia maia, pau mahi tino a tāhua mō tēnei kaupapa, mō tēnei tani whātino he rau. No reira ka nui hoki te aroha, kia kaha mā te atua koe e manaki e api. I roto i tēnei huarahi tino taumaha, tino wohunu. No reira ka nui hoki te aroha tēnā. Many of you will ask why I am here. And the main reason that I'm here is because of an incredible, passionate young lady called Marama, who addressed the Te Aroha Pukenga Koeke at a hui about a week ago. And in that hui, she asked for the Pukenga Koeke as the kaunihera kaumātua koeke o Te Aroha Whānuitonu. And in this hui, I'd never met Marama before, and wondered what this young lady was doing, having the cheek to address ngā koeke kaumātua o Te Aroha. She was passionate in what she said about this agreement. She wanted representation from the Te Aroha Pukenga to come here. She felt it was so important that Te Aroha should have a view as to what this agreement meant to Te Aroha mana motuhake and to Te Aroha tino rangatiratanga. Now, that's why I'm here. The chairman is not here. But thanks to Marama, who were in that hui, she was a very game young lady who presented her kōrero, we have to report back a whakao to the Te Aroha Pukenga Koeke, of which our kraua here, Tariki, is one of our krauas here, are members of that body. One of the kōreros that's likely, we were asked at that hui to put a rāhui upon the rohe of Te Aroha to the TPPA. That request was declined because you have to have a tūpāpaku. And Fred wouldn't volunteer. Incidentally, I think it's Fred who belongs to Tona, not me. Considered the kōrero of Aragui, and because nobody in Te Aroha was prepared to volunteer to Papaku, the request was declined. However, in the course of the last few days, a kaupapa is coming forward whereby the Te Aroha position is likely to be, if this agreement is signed, then Te Aroha is likely to declare itself a sovereign state within New Zealand. It has all the resources, it has the means of production. It is in a position to declare itself a state to protect its own position. Does it want to do it? No. We're quite happy to follow the Pāwhā and Wellington and leave it to Rotorua to protect our interests down there in Marae. But if, in your opinion, this agreement is such a threat to the mana rangatira of Te Aroha, then we would appreciate yours and this committee's advice as to whether the declaration of an independent state of Te Aroha is a move that we should look at. We would prefer that than a rāhui without a tūpāpaku. The tūpāpaku that was considered by the Pukenga Koeke was Papapepa. whakawhiri. But unfortunately, nobody has died yet. So we cannot claim the rāhui over the whenu. If somebody did, then we might look at it. But the declaration of a sovereign state for Te Arawa within Aotearoa is an option that we would like to look at in the course of the next few years if this government signs. It can sign away the economic sovereignty of the nation, but it cannot and should not sign away the manaranga tiratanga of Te Arawa. Now, I don't expect an answer on the TV now. This is only just part of a concluding comment, and we don't want to rerun the hui. Talk of the Waitangi Tribunal and what it can do is past. The agreement has been signed. The issue is only yes or no. That's the only thing. We can't amend this Ngangara agreement. We cannot amend it. It's trying to get the government to stop it, to change their view. And that's where the protests and that come in. I think you will have to get a bit more organised than protests. Protests are incredible, but you're dealing with multinational companies who have money. It's also been advised that the United States economy is subject to a $1.5 trillion loan to China, which means that its economy is sick as a dog. It's sick as a dog. So why are they trying to promote this rubbish and affect our sovereignty as a nation, not to mention Te Arawa's economic sovereignty? And not only economic sovereignty, our mana. And Te Arawa would like to be addressed by this committee and by yourself in terms of the realisticness of that proposal, bearing in mind the threat of the TPPA agreement to our position as a waka. We leave it to Ngāpuhi to do what they wish to do in Ngāpuhi. But I'm expressing a view which will be put before the Te Arawa Pukinga Koike in its next meeting to seek ratification before it goes out to Te Arawa as a tribe for consideration. But te mea ki tēnei ki a koe e te ahorangi ki a kōrua e te minita ki ana mo ngā whakamārama mo tēnei kaupapa a tino hera. Kino ana mo tātou ki wima. Nō reira, kāmi mo te mihi ki a koe, o te rā ki a koutou. Tēnā koe te abuti au, this is the first time I've ever met you. Kāmi hoki te mihi tēnā koe. A tātou hoki te tau kore. Tēnā koe. Nō reira, kāre tino me hoki ngā kore. Engari, e ngā mana, e ngā reo, tai nui waka koutou ngā kua tai ki te tautoko hoki. Tēnei hui. Tēnā koe moira. Koe o nuku e rā dairy farms hoki o Te Arawa o Tiohorangi, tēnā koe o Ngātirangi te hikāni ni e whai. Tō reira koutou mā, a kāre tino nui hoki ngā kōrero. Tēnā koutou kāmi. Tātou. Kia ora tātou iua i tēnei. Tēnei kaupapa nui. Kāre pā ki a tātou anaki, engari ka mahu e hoki wā tātou tamariki moko punau. So we have to plug in now. Andei te kupu. Ukuia. Ukuia. Wipe it. TPPA. Ukuia. Wai rā te kupu Māori mō te wipe it. Ra, ko kore pā mai ki te kōrero a tēnei o ngā rangatira, te rāhui. Hai a tērā, o te kupu ukuia. Ko kōrero a ngā tipiki au, ko puta o na whakara, mō te kaupapa nei. E whakai ana ngā te piki au, kau, are whai. Nā, ka putana tēnei kōrero, tai hoa pēr tērā kia hui anō tātā. Kia hui anō tātau katoa. Nō reira, ka mihi kia koutou. Ki te whakamārama mai kia mātau i ngā huatanga e whāna kia tātau te iwi Māori. Kāore kia tātau anaki. Ki te Pākehā, ki e takia ana, te tuahi e kua tū mai nei. Nō reira, whakamoimiti.
Nā mihi kia kaitaki pua, ko Marama Miko ahau. I am Marama Miko, chairperson of the Rotorua TPPA Action Group. Just got a few thank yous to say. Time is one of the greatest and most valuable gifts that we have while we're here. And so it is because of this and everything else that I want to say a huge thank you to each and every one of you that has made today's action a success. Thank you to the wonderful speakers for your informative kōrero and increasing consciousness on what the TPPA is and what it could potentially mean for New Zealanders and other member nations.
Now, those words I want to share with you. The most valuable resource isn't in the ground. It's on top of it. What is it? It is us. He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. The people, the people, the people. Without you, me, us, we, the higher powers that be can't function. What would happen if we took our power away from the powers that be? What would they have left? They would have nothing. Nothing. You see, we give them their power and we don't have to. We, the people, are the most valuable and most powerful resource on earth. And without us, the people, again, the powers that be would have nothing. We help them run the world. We've got to take our power back from them. Just think about that. We're not against trade, but what we are against is things that look to take our power away. TPPA, taking people's power away. It's neither free, nor is it fair. It's neither here, nor is it there. What it is, it's unfair. It's unfair because we, the people that the government claim to be working on behalf of, are disgusted because they haven't been. And I'm talking about the national government here. Yeah, I said it. That's right. You, John Key, and you, Tom Grosser. Or is it? Oh, I'm not going to say that. That was kind. But it's unfair because we, the people that, as I said, the government claim to be here on behalf of, are kept in the dark and not being made inclusive in decisions regarding our future. And that's wrong. We should decide what we want, not them. Now's the time, whānau, to etu. and get up and stand up. Stand up for your rights. We are the faces of those that have come and gone before us. It's our turn. We can carve our own paths, or we can follow the paths that countless others have already taken. We need to be the change that we want to see. Life isn't a movie. The script isn't already written. And we shouldn't let others write our stories for us. Why? Because it's our story. We have to write it. We won't win this without the wisdom of the elders and the energy of the young ones. We must unite. We must stand up and fight and demand our rights. I'm going to repeat something here because I can't relate. We won't win this individually. It will take the wisdom of the elders and the young people's energy to write a story that we will call victory. That's it. So I just want you, and you're already here today, which says a lot, to remember this. After this action, you walk out the door to keep standing up, to keep fighting, and to keep demanding your rights. It's about this, people. It's about us. It's about power to the people. Mad love to all. Kia ora. There's one final action that Ngā Pukinga Koike or Ngāti Pukiao want to deliver, and I have something that I'm going to read on their behalf before the karakia and the kai. Aroha mai.
Bernie Hornfick, you're a friendly neighbourhood socialist. Unfortunately, we don't have anybody in Parliament at the moment. The mess we've got in New Zealand is that we've got a treaty that is supposed to be a partnership. But how can you have a partnership if only one partner doesn't tell the other partner what the heck they're doing? Today we've heard from various speakers that this agreement is no good for the working class, which I'm a member of. We've also been told by other speakers that it's no good for small business. Well, that's 91% of the population. It's also, we've been told, it's not all that good for big business, some of it. So I'm wondering who benefits. Sounds like it's the 1%. That's all we've got left over. However, the question is what to do about it. And I don't think we have to go far to get an idea of what to do. I would say let's go to Whānau Apanui and look at what they did when the government said it was okay for survey vessels to plod up and down their fishing grounds. They took to the streets, every farm had a notice outside, they took to the water, and they invited Greenpeace to come and help support. As a result of that struggle, Petrobras, the Brazilian company, went home. But that wasn't the end of it. Mr. John Key went to Brazil, had a meeting with Petrobras directors and invited them back. And in the meantime, he passed a law which said we weren't allowed within 500 kilometres, we weren't allowed within 5 kilometres of a, 500 metres, weren't allowed within 500 metres of an oil survey ship. And the penalty was 2 years in jail. So that was his response. But let's go to the BBC in England, conducted a poll, and they asked the pollsters, who was the most important man of the last 1,000 years? And 67% of the people said it was Karl Marx. So, when I was in London, I went to Karl Marx's grave, and written on the bottom of his stone, it says, "The philosophers have explained the world, it's up to the radicals to change it." But what's not written on his stone is that the radicals can't do it on their own. They require large numbers of people to move with them. They require the masses. And the proof of that, let's go to Chile. The army surrounded the palace in Chile and kidnapped the president. Took him to an island off the coast. And then there was an argument between the soldiers. The officers wanted to kill him. But the soldiers said, hang on, he's one of us. And then a million people took to the streets of Chile. 1 million people. The army returned him to the palace. So it's the movement of large numbers of people which does it. Kia ora, Jan. I've been asked to present a letter from a part of Ngāti Pikiao to Te Uru o Flavel. Kia ora tātou.
And I've been asked to read it out. Lucky me. This has been addressed today for the preliminary signing of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. Tēnā koe te Ururōwhero. We, te Pūkenga Kōke o Ngāti Pikiao, understand that you, the Māori Party, have been telling the tangata whenua of New Zealand that you oppose the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, which is in line with policies of your party. We, te Pūkenga Kōke o Ngāti Pikiao, are adamant that the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement will do more to undermine our kaitiakitanga and our people than any action or lack thereof that this or previous governments have undertaken or not, as the case may be. We believe that the TPPA undermines the Crown's ability to act in good faith for the tangata whenua of Aotearoa. It is highly questionable how this government, with the support of the Māori Party, can regulate for the benefit of Māori, as said, benefit interferes with the profit-making of international corporations. No government will legislate in the interest of their people if to do so would invite legitimate legal sanctions. We have been made aware of payouts in the billions of dollars. New Zealand cannot cope with such threats. We challenge you, the Māori Party, to stand by the people you say you represent. It is only through your support, the supply and confidence arrangement you have with the national government that has allowed them to negotiate a secret trade deal. National's own administrations, we'll say that, to date has given fair and reasonable rise to the fear that this trade agreement will be damaging and harmful to the most needy and the most vulnerable in New Zealand society, especially Māori. In order for you to be seen as standing by your people, we say you must now remove your supply and confidence agreement from the National Party. This removing their mandate to act as our government and removing their ability to ratify this treaty on our behalf. They have not asked us, they have not consulted with us, they are not representing us, and as such, you must stop them from agreeing to the final signing of this trade agreement. We advise you with all humility that you will gain more at the next election by walking away from this coalition now than you presume to gain now by remaining at the table.
Kia ora.
Signed on behalf of Ngāti Pūkeo, kōreke o te, signed on to Pukenga kōreke o Ngāti Pūkeo. And that was on behalf of Fred Pata and Te Ao Kimurihu.
Kia ora tātou. So for some time now I've been trying to wrap this up. So I want to call it right there because the tone of the hui has slightly turned in the last half hour, 45 minutes, and become a little bit ambushy. Therefore, I'd like to ask Papa David in California to close our hui with the karakia so that we can all relax and try to get through this scope of as best we can. Kia ora.
Amen.